사실 저도 웨스트포인트를 졸업을 했습니다. 그래서 제 모교고요. 오랜만에 진짜 저랑 같이 웨스트포인트, 저보다 보니까 한 2년 선배시더라고요. 그런데 참 30년 후에 인생이 공평하지 않는 게 한 분은 준장을 달고 나오고 저는 별로 이렇게 꼭 그렇게 되는 것 같습니다. 그래서 하여튼 간에 오늘 진짜 좋은 얘기를 많이 드릴 텐데, 웨스트포인트 하면은 뭐 친숙하기도 하고 많이 들어본 그 학교잖아요. 그렇지만 어떻게 보면 일반인이 쉽게 다가갈 수 없는 또 그런 학교, 약간 좀 신비로운 학교 같기도 한 것 같습니다. 그래서 오늘 그 웨스트포인트의 리더십에 대해서 우리 트레이너 장군님이, 딘이죠. 학장님이시, 오늘 강의를 해드릴 텐데요. 좀 그런 것 같습니다. 제가 보면은, 저도 이제 웨스트포인트 나오고 군대 생활하고 이제 예편해가지고 하버드 비즈니스 스쿨 나오고, 그리고 이제 이렇게 많은, 사회생활을 할 때보다 느끼는 것은, 제가 웨스트포인트에서 배웠던 그런 리더십, 이런 ethical standard, moral value, 이런 것이 굉장히 도움이 많이 돼요. 그 뒤에 뭐 석사 받고 뭐 이런 것보다도 제 삶에는 그 4년에 배운 것이 진짜 많이 도움이 되고 있습니다. 그러면 웨스트포인트에서는 어떻게 그렇게 카뎃을 인생의 진짜 끝까지 살 동안 그렇게 좋은 밸류를 줄 수 있느냐, 가르칠 수 있느냐가 궁금하지 않으세요? 그거에 대해서 우리 팀 트레이너 장군님이 오늘 얘기를 해드리겠습니다. 제가 사실 학장이시거든요, 딘. 근데 딘이 웨스트포인트에서는 굉장히 무서운 사람이에요. 이게 딘한테 간다는 것은 뭐 낙제를 해서 가거나 퇴학하거나 뭐 이런 것 때문에 가는 거지, 교장보다 더 무서운 사람이 딘입니다. 그래서 아까 좀 얘기를 했는데, 우리 팀은 아마 역사 중에서 가장 젊으신 딘이신 것 같아요. 그만큼 아마 공부도 잘하시고 아마 재능이 아주 홀출난 그런 아마 딘인 것 같습니다. 우선 그래서 딘의 티모티 트레이너에 대해서 바이오는 제가 좀 생략을 하고요. 거기 나와 있기 때문에 생략을 하겠습니다. 우선 큰 박수로 우리 제너럴 티모티 딘을 박수 한번 맞주겠습니다.
Well, thank you, Sonny, and I'm very honored to be here today. I also feel comfortable being here today knowing that Sonny is a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, so you make me feel more comfortable, and you honor me by your presence. Thank you. And again, thank you all for inviting me here today, and I'm very happy to be here with you in Seoul. As Sonny said, I'm Tim Trainor. I'm the Dean at the United States Military Academy at West Point. I have been very fortunate to graduate from West Point in 1983 and serve a career in the United States Army for about 30 years. The Army enabled me to earn a Master of Business Administration degree at the Fuqua School of Business at Duke University and a PhD in Industrial Engineering at North Carolina State University. This iconic picture you see behind us shows West Point cadets on parade in front of a statue of General George Washington from our American Revolution. I will tell some of the history of West Point as I go along during this presentation. Now, since I'm in the Army, we have to follow rules, as you would expect. And we have lots of lawyers who tell us what to do. And so in order to stay straight with all the lawyers, I do have to throw this disclaimer up here, basically just telling you what I'm going to say are my own views and not necessarily totally the views of the United States government. I'm going to show a lot of pictures as I go through this presentation to really get you to understand what West Point is about. I'm going to start by telling you about all the fun I get to have as the dean there. This is what I call the fun stuff, the fun part of my job. In addition to running the education program at a top-tier college in the United States, I get to have a lot of fun with our students, and our students we call cadets. What this represents up at the top, well, starting on the left, was me getting involved in some of the summer training. I'm on a what we call a slide for life there, on going across the big lake, where you drop into the lake as part of our training. And then I got to climb up a ladder, and on that top picture shows me walking across the balance beam above the lake. Well, cadets being who they are, as I got halfway across the beam, they all started yelling from the bank of the lake, telling me to do a cheer, what we call a rocket cheer at West Point. It's a very famous, Sonny probably remembers it, although I won't test him on this, his knowledge. Anyway, I turn, do it, and then continue on and get on a rope like you see on the top right, and then drop into the lake from there. But it's all a lot of fun. And I get to do these kind of things in addition to running a top-tier college. Now, what I'm going to talk about now is what I will call life in my house. I'm an engineer, and so you see the castle symbol on the right-hand side, and my wife is a social psychologist, so we think very differently. My wife went to the University of North Carolina for a PhD in social psychology, while I went to nearby Duke and North Carolina State. Now, down in North Carolina in the United States, college basketball is very, very big. And unfortunately, my wife corrupted all our kids to be Tar Heel fans, while I'm a big Duke fan. Now, as a psychologist, my wife attempts to warp my mind, or rather shape it for the better. And she has a very stereotypical view of engineers. Now, when I go to engineering conferences, my wife will ask me, what do we do for fun? Do you compare pocket protectors? And I think her feelings are summed up best by just saying, we are very different and will remain so. I know this conference is discussing the development of global talent. At West Point, we focus on developing cadets as leaders for our Army and for our nation. I plan to talk about some of our history and to provide you with an overview of our programs and focus mainly on how we develop cadets as leaders of character. I believe our approach to education and leader development provides our graduates an ability to put complex issues into perspective and to understand the contextual lenses with which to view those issues. I'm going to start off talking about the history of West Point. And what you see in front of you is a picture of the Hudson River, which goes from Canada all the way down to New York City, where it feeds into the Atlantic Ocean. Now, West Point is named aptly as our garrison sits on the west bank of the Hudson River. So where you see in the top of that image where the big bend in the river, West Point is right on the left-hand side of that picture, or the west bank of the Hudson. In 1778, our fledgling country was at war with the King of Great Britain, and the British occupied New York City at that time. General Washington was worried about the British sailing north out of New York City and controlling the Hudson River, thereby preventing our forces from crossing the river between the colonies of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut to the east and north, and to New York and towards the south. And so General Washington knew terrain, and he established a garrison of guns right there at that West Point on the Hudson, guns and soldiers, so that they would fire on any British ships that attempted to pass by that area. You see, right at that bend, ships have to slow down very considerably in order to navigate those bends. And so the defense worked, and West Point had a strategic role in our Revolutionary War. The garrison remained after the war, and in 1802, President Jefferson, our third president of the United States, signed a law establishing a military academy at West Point, and we have been developing leaders for our country ever since. This is a picture of West Point today taken from the river. Because of our mission, West Point is also of strategic value to our country today. A phrase we are very fond of saying is that much of the history we teach was made by those we taught. Famous generals from the U.S. Civil War like Ulysses Grant, John J. Pershing from World War I, and Generals McArthur and Eisenhower from World War II are West Point graduates. Generals Abizaid, Petraeus, Austin, and Odierno, famous from our recent conflicts, are also graduates. But our graduates also make great contributions to society as business leaders, presidents of the United States, and senators, astronauts, and leaders in higher education and in other organizations. I'd like to talk about just two of them pictured here. Up in the top center is General Retired Eric Shinseki. General Shinseki was the senior ranking officer in the United States Army as the Chief of Staff of the Army in the early 2000s, and then he went on, after he retired, to become now the Secretary of our Veterans Affairs. Directly below him is a picture of Bob McDonald, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Procter & Gamble. These gentlemen remain connected to West Point and help grow leaders today out in our society and around the world. Bob McDonald, just a couple of weeks ago, ran a leadership conference at West Point where he brought young people from around the world to come visit and experience West Point and to go through a week-long conference on leader development there. I call this West Point at a glance. West Point is a 4-year undergraduate institution of higher education. All cadets who complete the program earn a Bachelor of Sciences degree and a commission as an officer in the United States Army. Now, our graduates must serve a minimum of 5 years on active duty and 3 years of reserve duty time. We offer a full range of academic majors from the humanities to engineering. We are what is considered a highly selective college in terms of admissions of young people to the academy. Now at West Point, we develop cadets as both scholars and warriors. We develop young men and women intellectually in the finest traditions of Aristotle and the Athenians, and we develop them militarily and physically in the finest traditions of the Spartans and King Leonidas. Now, I really like the quote which is below, which is attributed to Sir Francis Bacon, but can also be traced to similar thoughts of Thucydides. And so to understand West Point, you really need to understand this duality of purpose. And this quote, "The nation that makes a great distinction between its scholars and warriors will have its thinking done by cowards and its fighting done by fools." And so I really think that sums up what I will call the duality of our purpose at the Academy. This is what we call our vision for the United States Military Academy, or it is to what we aspire to achieve. We believe we are the preeminent leader development and academic institute for young men and women in the United States. Our graduates have to serve around the world in very complex environments, and we develop them to meet these challenges. Above all, we want our graduates to be inspired to serve their fellow human beings and our country. Now, this vision is quite bold, as you might imagine. And how do we do this? And that's what I'm going to focus on now. Our means of accomplishing this vision is through the West Point Leader Development System. And so now I'm going to go through and describe what this is in some detail. But first, before I do this, to put into perspective, warfare has changed. And so as warfare has evolved over the millennium, so must how leaders are developed change. Armies like the Greeks and the Romans often fought in tightly controlled formations like the phalanx, in part because it was very difficult to communicate over any distance, and leaders could control the movements and actions of these large group of fighters in these type of mass formations you see in the top left. On the top right, that's a picture of the Battle of Hastings in 1066 between the Normans and Anglo-Saxons, and that demonstrated what we will call the early days of mobile warfare in the use of horse cavalry and firepower with archers. Fast forward to the 20th century and to the picture at the bottom left with World War II. Technology evolved. We had airplanes and large ships for transport, radios over which to communicate, and vehicles to carry weapons, ammunition, and supplies over long distances. This graphic only partially demonstrates the enormous complexity of the invasion of France in 1944 by the Allied forces in Normandy, with planes carrying thousands of paratroopers, large ships, each with tens of landing craft and hundreds of soldiers, all synchronized to land at a relatively concentrated area at precise times to surprise and overwhelm the German defenders in order to gain a foothold on the European continent from which to pour thousands more soldiers into France to defeat the Axis powers. And then down in the lower right portion, today in Afghanistan, we do not have large formations of soldiers and Marines fighting huge battles with the enemy. Rather, we operate in small units from mountain outposts and in villages moving about the difficult terrain in the country in helicopters. Technology that provides a global reach for communications and intelligence collection and dissemination, along with our ability to quickly reinforce units and actions from planes and helicopters, enables the military to move in these small formations. This is the mission of the United States Military Academy at West Point. Those three key verbs, educate, train, and inspire, capture the keys to our success. However, please note that I highlighted the key phrase, leader of character, in red. This is the most critical component of our mission, seeking to ensure cadets are developed morally and ethically to be the best leader possible. We want cadets to do their duty without fail, to do it with honor, and to do it in service to our country. We want all our graduates to seek to serve a full career of 20 to 30 years in the military, although they are only obligated to serve 5 years on active duty as an Army officer. This is what I term our overall developmental framework. So put in big picture, how do we integrate all our programs and what we do at the Academy to achieve that mission I just showed you. And so I'm going to walk through this. We are not just a college and not just a military training organization. We seek to develop cadets who are critical thinkers and creative problem solvers, prepared to lead in a complex world. We build leadership and teamwork skills while flaming within cadets a passion for service to others. So this requires what I'll call a holistic approach to development. We recognize that people come to us, young people come to us at different levels of readiness to develop along the different dimensions that we stress. So we have to tailor some of the experiences based on the individual. We deliberately design and integrate challenging developmental experiences for cadets. Cadets gain new knowledge and capabilities to think through and perform our various developmental experiences. Development also requires time to reflect on the knowledge and experiences in order to understand what learning has been gained and how this better prepares you to be a leader in the future. Now, this development doesn't happen overnight. People need time to grow intellectually, militarily, physically, and moral ethically. Our end state is preparation, is our cadets being prepared to meet the challenges faced by our graduates around the world. Now, you see a point about Assessment up there. Assessment, we have many, many feedback mechanisms to help us identify how well our programs are doing to help cadets achieve what we desire them to achieve. We also challenge our cadets a lot, and that's very specifically defined. At West Point, I know I experienced this, I'm sure Sonny experienced this, we all fail at some point. You're going to fail in something. It's just bound to happen, and that is okay. But that's tough for many people, young people, to understand. Our young people who come to us as cadets come to us as the best students, athletes, and social magnets from their high school experiences, and many of them have never really experienced any sort of failure or significant challenge in their life. So by design, the amount of rigor of the experiences of the cadets engage in almost assures that each will fail at some point during their West Point career. Individual growth and learning happens through that failure, primarily by how somebody responds to such adversity. And we seek to challenge them to see how they will respond to that adversity. But we don't leave them hanging to do it all by themselves. We provide a lot of support to our cadets, a lot of resources put into helping them get through and achieve their full potential at the military academy. So our faculty are not just teachers. They serve as mentors across the variety of experiences in a cadet's life, in academics, in their sports, and in social clubs and their military training. And so this is what I'll call the dimensions of development. And this, I'm going to start to focus now and talk more specifically about each of these. This graphic depicts our 4 developmental dimensions of growth we target at West Point. What we call officership is a matter of both competence and character. The 3 dimensions at the bottom of the graphic emphasize competence: intellectual development, military development, and physical development, competence-based, while the development of character is woven throughout their experiences and throughout the program. The character development is the lens which shapes the programmed development and filters their leader experiences. Leaders of character are resilient, ethically informed, and socially adept, and live the Army values in all that they do. Now, this is a bit of a complicated slide, but I'm just going to walk through, and this is really just to set the stage, because I'm going to talk in more detail about each of these momentarily. This is an overview of our 3 primary capstone or competence-based programs: our academic program, military program, and physical program. And so starting from the bottom and progressing through, each of the programs sequentially and progressively build on each other to achieve our outcome of a cadet as a future commissioned officer, leader of character in our Army. So looking at the academic portion, we have many what we call core or required classes that cadets take, and I'll describe those more in detail in a few moments. But they primarily take required courses in their first 2 years of academics, and then they'll take their courses in their major during their 3rd and 4th years. And we cap those off with what we call capstone experiences, in-depth experiential learning experiences in their major to seek the fullest of their intellectual development. In terms of their military development, each cadet starts out learning to become a follower. And that's an interesting concept, but in order to be a good leader, you first must develop the characteristics of being a good follower. And so that's what we start at West Point. Build in them how to be a good follower, and then we build on their leader experiences, and the cadets are the ones who are the leaders for their classmates and for the underclassmen, so that by the time they're in their 4th year or senior year at the academy, they are the leaders of the Corps. And then finally, in the physical program, cadets go through a series of physical education courses and sports throughout the program in order to develop them physically. And then our moral, ethical education programs are woven across all three of the programs I just spoke about. And this is a shared responsibility. Everybody at West Point is responsible for helping develop cadets, whether it's an instructor, a coach, a tactical officer, somebody out in military training. All of us contribute to helping develop cadets to be the best they can be in the future. And now, since I'm the Dean of Academics, I'm going to focus a lot on our intellectual development programs because obviously that's what I know best. Now, our curriculum is designed very purposely as a 4-year liberal arts education program that results in cadets earning a Bachelor of Sciences degree with a specific major. Cadets take a large number of required or core courses that are balanced across the humanities, social sciences, math, basic sciences, and engineering. Cadets also take one of 37 different majors that span the disciplines from the humanities to engineering. However, cadets develop intellectually through many experiences outside the classroom that bring their curriculum to life. Cadets compete in academic competitions around the world. They do research with our faculty. They perform service projects. And they do applied work that integrates concepts they have learned across the curriculum. These are a big part of the development of innovation and creativity in these young leaders. And so just to describe a couple of these pictures, up in that top right is a picture of cadets on a geology-type field experience. In the lower right are cadets who, from our Model United Nations team who took second place in the world competition a couple of years ago at Singapore. In the bottom picture represents cadets who are out with students from other universities down in Honduras working on projects to help restore some areas affected by floods in the rainy season. On the lower left, that's a picture of cadets from our award-winning cyber competition team, which does competitions against the other service academies. And in the top left is a picture of a cadet doing research in the life sciences. As I talked about the vision before for the academy, this is the vision or to what we aspire to achieve in the academic program. The way I describe our curriculum, that core curriculum or required courses provide a breadth of exposure to a breadth of disciplines across the humanities, social sciences, math, science, and engineering, while our majors enable cadets to study in depth and develop those deep intellectual skills that are needed in order to be critical thinkers and creative problem solvers. So some of the pictures there, what they describe, that one on the top left there is a cadet doing basic science on the communication at the ribonucleic acid level. And I can barely say that, let alone figure out what that cadet is actually doing there, but I'm sure he's doing wonderful things. Down in the bottom left is a group of cadets who are using hyperspectral imagery in order to study new camouflage patterns for future uniforms. And then the other picture is a group of cadets who are using rather crude methods, I'll say, to study the mechanics of flight. We devote a lot of effort and resources to giving cadets experiences, what I'll call experiential learning or educational enrichment experiences to round them out. And much of them are global experiences. We feel it's very important to get our cadets out around the world to experience other cultures, because when they're serving as officers, they will serve in many places around the world. So during the summers, we provide cadets the opportunities to do internships, either at other universities or serving with non-governmental organizations, charity organizations, or other Department of Defense organizations or government organizations around the world doing research work, service work, and other type of of activities. We also send cadets around the world to study a semester abroad. Not all cadets get to go, but about 10% of our cadets end up spending a semester at another college or university around the world. And you can see the numbers. And that picture in the top left is one of our young cadets when she was at Saint-Cyr Military Academy in France last year doing combatives training. Down in the bottom right is one of our cadets who was doing a semester abroad in Jordan. And what that picture is of her during her free time. What she was doing was she was teaching English to refugees from both Syria and Iraq who were living in Jordan at the time. And then that last picture there on the bottom left is a picture of our cadets who were on an internship in the summer in the country of Georgia. And so some other pictures from our semester abroad experience. Cadets there on our left spend time in Russia. We had cadets at Voronezh State University last year, and I had the great pleasure of visiting them down there and made the acquaintance of a former Soviet officer, now retired officer from the Russian Army, who had served at Chernobyl. And it was quite an interesting experience discussing his experiences in helping clean up after that disaster at Chernobyl. In the top right are cadets. These are cadets who were in Taiwan studying at Fujian Catholic University. And in the lower right is a picture of cadets who were in the Ukraine, and they had gone off as part of this to run a marathon in Siberia, the Siberian Marathon, and that's a picture of them at the finish line. And so quite an adventure for them. What I'd like to do now is describe a few more pictures of some of the summer internships. In the top left is a picture of cadets who were in Israel at the time. That's a picture of they were visiting a shrine in Haifa, Israel, and their project or what they were doing, their studies were supported by the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs, and they were there not just with cadets from West Point, but also with midshipmen from our Naval Academy and cadets from our Air Force Academy in the United States. In the top right is a picture of cadets who were serving in Honduras, supporting a project called working with an international nonprofit hydrophilanthropy organization called the Water for People program. In the bottom right, there's a picture of our cadets doing basic science research at our Center for Disease Control in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I love the story of the picture down in the lower left, and I'll spend a little time on this. This is a picture of our cadets and Ugandan engineers working side by side on a biodigester. This digester, which uses waste and food scraps to create methane for cooking and fertilizer, was constructed in conjunction with the Kasisi Project, which is an organization focused on conservation education in Kibale National Park. Now, this is the second digester that our cadets have been involved with in the past 2 years. In partnership with the Green Heat of Uganda, a company that supports small-scale biogas development in Uganda. So the cadets' interaction with the Ugandan engineers and construction workers allowed the cadets to gain a perspective on construction methods in the developing world. We have a lot of external validation that West Point is doing a good job. You can see this just represents a graphic that describes some of the accolades that the Academy has won. Many of our cadets over the years have earned what are called Rhodes Scholarship, Marshall, Truman, and other high-level international scholarships. The two cadets in the pictures below, cadets Kylie Hunkler and Evan Soblowski, both earned Rhodes Scholarships last year from the graduating class and will be studying in the UK in the coming years. We also, in the United States, there's this very popular thing to do college rankings, and West Point does very well in those college rankings. You can see the numbers for U.S. News and World Report, the Princeton Review, and the Forbes rankings, and we've done very well. Just yesterday, I got a note that we received another, did well in another ranking. Frankly, it was a ranking I'd never heard of before, but it was an organization called BusinessInsider.com, and they ranked through a survey of their readership. They professionals in the tech IT industry ranked West Point as the 8th best college in the country in terms of technical capability. And so right up there with folks like MIT, Stanford, Harvard, and the like. But the ranking on that picture that I'm most proud of is right in the middle on Princeton Review, where it says we were ranked to have the #1 most accessible professors. And by that, why I think that's important is we require our faculty to be available to cadets at all times. So if a cadet has an issue, they can contact their professor at home or late in the evenings and ask for help, and our faculty will bend over backwards to do what they can to help our cadets succeed. Because the view we take is that we do a very good job on our admissions process and admit top quality young people to the academy, and we wish to see them succeed. I'm going to shift focus now and talk a little bit about our military development program. And so our military dimension emphasizes development of leadership and teamwork skills and basic military tactics and techniques. Cadets are immersed in leadership practice as they take on progressively more responsible positions of authority in leading their fellow cadets. The military training also attempts to replicate some of the current scenarios our graduates will face, such as you see a picture down in the bottom left of cadets engaging in a negotiation exercise with a role player speaking Arabic. This slide depicts some of the required experiences on the military development slide. And so starting from the top, in the first 2 summers cadets are there, they go through field training called Cadet Basic Training and Cadet Field Training. And then in their 3rd and 4th years, they focus on then becoming what we call the chain of command, or being the leaders of the underclass cadets who are going through Cadet Basic Training, Cadet Field Training. In addition to that, they go through some very specific military specialty training and leader development training. Many will go serve in Army units around the world for a few weeks and also do internships like I described before. In addition to those practical leadership experiences, the cadets also go through a program of military science courses, and you can see those represented on the right-hand side. In physical development, we require all cadets to be athletes because the military by nature is a physically demanding profession. Cadets take a full regimen of required physical education classes such as boxing, swimming, and combatives. Cadets also have to complete exacting physical fitness tests, as do all Army soldiers. One of our very favorite tests is what's called the indoor obstacle course, which is represented by those cadets climbing the ropes there in one of our old gyms called Hayes Gyms. And I'm sure Sonny remembers that experience with fondness, as I do, because that test, I have to assure you, Sonny, has not changed in 30 years. And it is still one of the toughest things that we put cadets through. Every cadet is an athlete is another mantra of West Point. All have to participate in either one of our intercollegiate athletic teams, competitive sports clubs, or intramural company athletic teams. You can see the number of teams we have at the intercollegiate level and at the club sport level. And several of our competitive club sports teams have been national champions in the United States in recent years, like our boxing team, team handball, women's rugby, our orienteering team, and pistol. In the next few slides, I'm going to show you some pictures of cadets in athletic competitions. And so this is a picture which shows cadets competing in what we call those competitive club sports. So top left is orienteering. Then going around clockwise, you'll see we have cadets in team handball, in combat weapons, in fencing, pistol, and then another picture of women's team handball. This is a picture of some of our intercollegiate athletic teams, like our track and field team, women's basketball, swimming, and lacrosse. I said before that moral ethical development was critical to what we do as we are building cadets to be leaders of character. And this is the foundation. What this represents here, our honor code, is the foundation of that development. All cadets are expected to adhere to this honor code. Any violations of this are adjudicated by other cadets, and the programs are developmental by design. We have ethics education classes and exercises that cadets engage in year-round in order to help build upon the foundation of values each individual brings with them to the academy. Now, we want and need our graduates to learn about themselves and to learn what makes them tick, so to speak, and to understand how to be resilient and to overcome adversity. We also want them to develop a sense of service to others, or a call to serve a call higher than themselves. So what these pictures represent here is, in the top left, are cadets who help honor veterans who have passed away. We have a cemetery at the military academy, and cadets on special events like our upcoming Veterans Day in a few days. Cadets will decorate and make sure the graves are appropriately decorated with American flags to honor those soldiers who have died in previous years. In the top right, that's a picture of a cadet going through boxing. And in a way, boxing is a way of developing character because they have to learn to overcome adversity. In the lower left, those are cadets who work each year with what's called the Special Olympics organization, who runs a big event each year at the academy. And then down in the lower right, that's a picture of cadets on what's called the Tower to Tunnels run. And I'll describe that here just for a moment. Is going back to the events of September 11th, 2001, when the planes hit the World Trade Centers in New York City, there was a story about a firefighter, and you probably know many people perished that day. Over 3,000 people perished that day in New York City. And there was a firefighter by the name of Stephen Siller. He was off duty, and he was driving home away from Manhattan through what's called the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And the picture of the tunnel there is, you can see in that lower right picture, cadets are coming out of that tunnel. And so the story was, he was driving away from Manhattan through that tunnel, and when he got to the other side in what's called Brooklyn, another borough of New York City, he heard on his radio about the towers being hit. And despite being off duty, he turned his truck around and tried to drive back through the tunnel to go help the firefighters who were gathering at the World Trade Center that was burning. Well, he couldn't get through the tunnel because of the traffic. So he pulled his truck off the side of the road, took his equipment out of his truck, put it on, and he ran through the tunnel carrying many pounds of equipment, including his oxygen tanks, ran through the tunnel all the way to the World Trade Center, joined in fighting the fires there with his fellow firefighters, and he was one of 343 firefighters who perished that day when the towers came down. And so now, each year, as a memorial, in New York City has a run that follows the path that Stephen Siller ran through the tunnel and to the World Trade Center, and our cadets participate in it each year. And so this is a picture of our cadets running through the tunnel on a previous run, and it is a very emotional event, but it shows it's one of the ways we help cadets develop that calling to serve a higher purpose in life. And so this is intended to come back to one of my earlier slides when I talked about Athens and Sparta, but to put it in current day context. Our graduates have to be both scholars and warriors in order to succeed in the complex security environment in which they will lead soldiers. And this quote that I said before is quite appropriate to describe what we do at the military academy. Now, this is a very iconic picture of graduation at West Point, and this represents the ending of the 4-year developmental experience for our cadets. But really, it is just the beginning. It is the beginning of an exciting career as a commissioned officer in the United States Army, serving where our nation calls. So I hope I provided you an understanding of how we develop cadets to be future leaders to work within a global environment. I appreciate your time and attention, and I wish you the best as you go through the rest of this conference. Thank you very much.
Tim, that's just outstanding rundown of what West Point do. A big change for me anyway. I'm going to ask a few questions to Tim, and we'll, after that I'll open the two floors. Okay. Tim, I mean, one thing that strikes me is this honor code, which is very, very unique to West Point. And you know, if you could just elaborate on, you know, the code itself and how you go about implementing it, because everybody talks about the code and everybody has that, but it's very difficult to implement. And the second corollary to that question is the second part, which is, you know, cadets don't lie, cheat, or steal. But the second part, which is interesting, is that, or do not tolerate those who do. You know, can you explain that a little bit? And I think it's interesting because, you know, as I'm involved in a lot of business dealings and transactions, and in Korea, and there is this notion, school of thought, that whether moral values and characters can be taught. Can you really teach these things, or is this part of the DNA? And what West Point does, seemingly, is very, very interesting, is that you take a teenager and basically you to instill these beliefs in 4 years. And no other institution does that. And what's the secret?
Well, thank you, Sonny. Our honor code is, in many ways, we consider that the foundation of developing in cadets that mantra of duty, honor, and country. It is a very short statement, as you saw. A cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. Very short statement. You asked specifically about how do we implement it. It is a cadet-run program. So what we attempt to instill in cadets is that they own it and they run it. And so I mentioned in my talk that they adjudicate any problems that cadets experience with following that code. And that's very, very important. It would be much easier, frankly, if just the administration folks like myself ran the code. But then if you do it that way, we believe cadets would not get that sense of ownership of the honor code. Because really what the honor code is about is, while that statement is very important for the honor code, what it's really all about is developing in young people a sense to live honorably, that it's important throughout your life to live honorably. So the code is one way to do that. And it is, you know, frankly difficult because you take young people who come from around the United States and even from around the world. We have several cadets, foreign international cadets who are at the academy, but you take cadets from all around the world and put them through the program, and they come from at very different
points in their life in terms of the concept of living honorably. And so what we do to implement it is we have a very specific education program that we take cadets through, an honor and values education program that starts from the first day they arrive at the academy. The first day they arrive at the academy, they get this little card, like a business card, with the code written on it, and are told to memorize that and to inculcate it. But then we take them through several education classes throughout the 4-year experience to develop in them not just an understanding of the code and how to live by it, but truly, again, is to get at the inner sense of why we have a code and why it's important. And as I said, the cadets adjudicate it. So if a cadet is found to have, if a cadet is brought up by either an instructor or a fellow cadet for being suspected of violating the honor code, it is cadets who investigate that, and they go through their own hearing and process. It's almost like a judicial process. They go through to decide whether the cadet has violated the code or not, and then recommend to our superintendent, who is the university president, what the punishment level should be for the cadet. And so it's all cadets who run this, but really what it's all about is getting at that sense of living honorably. And that's where it goes to your second point there, where you're talking about toleration. You know, the second phrase on that statement is, nor tolerate those who do. And that's really important. And that's very hard. It's very hard for young people to understand that they don't want to turn in their friend or their buddy. And that is very, very hard. None of us want to let a friend down. But really, service as an Army officer, service to the nation is about what we are challenged to do, and what we swear an oath to do as an Army officer is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And so my allegiance, the allegiance of a cadet, goes to the set of principles and ideas upon which our nation were founded. And so that's where our allegiance lies. While you do have allegiance to the person to your right and left, and that's critical, your higher calling is to have an allegiance to what the beliefs are upon which our nation were founded, and the beliefs upon which your code of ethics are established for the academy. So but it is very tough, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I'll tell you, it is tough to get people to understand the toleration aspect, but it is important to the overall concept of living honorably.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I always found interesting about West Point Honor Code is that when you're taking tests, there is no proctor, right? You know, all the students do it, and then basically they finish on their own, and it's just amazing how unsupervised that is, and that's pretty interesting. So, in Honor Code, you don't have to restructure you out or anything like that. Just one time, that's it. How does it work?
Oh, yeah, I didn't address that. I should have addressed that. Thank you. It is what we call a developmental program. So if a cadet makes a mistake and does have an honor violation, they can be retained at the academy. They're not necessarily kicked out. Particularly a young cadet in their first year, maybe their second year, who has an honor violation, they own up to it. They acknowledge that they failed and they made a mistake. They could be given a chance to stay at the academy. Normally, it will mean they have to stay an additional 6 months to a year and go through a special mentorship program. But cadets in their younger years, if they make a mistake, we realize that it is developmental. They can learn from the mistake and continue on. That's a little different than, say, a cadet who's a senior getting ready to graduate, and if they make an egregious mistake, they typically might be what we call separated or dismissed from the academy.
Okay. In your speech, one item that was very interesting was it is important to fail, and you mentioned that the academy overloads so much that you're bound to fail during your academy years, and it's important to actually come out of that. And can you elaborate a little bit more on that failure and recovery?
What I was talking about is that we do have, as I said, we have academic requirements, physical education requirements, military development requirements, and that's a lot. The cadets will have a full schedule, a full plate, and it's bound to happen at some point. A cadet will fail something, say a test in an academic course, or a physical fitness test, or something like that, and it's bound to happen, and that's okay, because what you're really seeking to see is how the cadets respond to that failure. And that's important to our own, many of you all probably have experienced some failure in your life, and what's really important is how do you learn from that failure, and how do you go forward and develop yourself, and it's really about what you learn from that experience. And so I know myself, I did fail a few tests in my day as a cadet, and I'm sure, Sonny, you were probably a perfect cadet, so you probably didn't fail any, but...
No, I was not. No, that's why you're dean. I'm here. So, for someone to just listen to your speech, it's a lot for cadet. You gotta do academic work, just like any other college students. Then on top of that, you got the physical training, which seems like almost every day, and then you got the military training. I mean, what's the typical hours? How many hours do these guys sleep per day?
They probably sleep, if they're lucky, about 5 hours a day, if they're lucky. So 4 to 5 hours, typically 5, I would say, hours a day. So it's a full schedule. We start early. Most cadets start about 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and classes go from 7:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they have athletics and sports, and then studying in the evening. But we hope the lights go off by midnight, but I know many of them stay on beyond that.
Yeah, I remember I never slept before 12 o'clock. But one thing, it sticks with you the rest of your life. I still get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I go to sleep at around midnight, so after all that drinking, so I have about 5 hours sleep, for 30-some years, so it sticks with you. The other one that's kind of sensitive subject is that sexual harassment. It's a co-ed, obviously, and in Korea a few months ago there was inappropriate behavior between male cadets and female cadets in a Korean military academy. I'm sure you have similar things in West Point. How do you cope with that? What type of training you do? How do you deal with all those sensitive matters?
Yeah. And unfortunately, sexual harassment and sexual assault does happen at the military academy at West Point in small numbers, but it's still one incident is too many, and it's a fact. That cadets come from all parts of the country, from different backgrounds, and you put people together in a very close living environment, and unfortunately things happen at times. And so what we deal with it is just like I described the education for the honor code. We have education, what we call respect education, and all cadets are required to go through this respect education starting right from the first time they enter the academy, and it goes all through their 4 years experience. They go through respect education, and it's all about treating everyone with dignity and respect, because you can't be a good teammate and serve well in the Army unless you treat everyone with dignity and respect. And so we focus on that. We also have so many education programs for respect and for specific training on preventing sexual assault and sexual harassment. We also have many different ways in which cadets can anonymously report any issues related to sexual assault and sexual harassment, so that the administration can deal with them. And if unfortunately someone is a victim, we have many programs to get them the appropriate medical, counseling, and other help they need. And then we have the legal systems to deal with prosecuting any perpetrators. But the key to this whole thing is prevention, and we put a lot of effort into training and education over the entire 4-year program, and not just for the cadets, but also for the staff and faculty and everybody who serves at the Academy.
Okay. So in West Point program, do you differentiate a female cadet program versus a male cadet programs, or is kind of integrated programs, and so you expect same amount of rigor to female cadets?
The programs are fully integrated. The cadets live side by side in the barracks, what we call the dormitories, what we call them the barracks in the military. But they live on the same floors there. They're in the same classes, same physical education class. The only difference on the physical education classes is our women's take a combatives program instead of the boxing program. They can take boxing if they wish. But they do all the same physical fitness tests, all the everything else, all the military training, all the academic classes, and they're all fully integrated. And one of the steps we're taking at the Academy is we are actually, right now we have about 16% of our cadet population are women. We're actually increasing that. And that will increase this year probably till about 20% in the next class that comes in, and maybe beyond that to about 25%. But part of that is as our Army goes through a transition now of opening more positions to women in the Army, we're going to bring in more women at the Academy in order to fill those positions when they graduate. And we also think that will help with the environment of sexual assault, sexual harassment. When you have a greater concentration of women in the environment, that will help with lessening sexual assault, sexual harassment.
Yeah. You know, with just like any other program, even you have a great program, I'm sure there are bound to be people either failed or decided to go against it. Is there punishment for those people failed, or what do you do for those either through their own negligence or purposely or inadvertently, or what do you do with those people?
Well, there are yes, there are cadets who have problems and discipline problems, I think is what you're referring to. We in the as part of the program, there is cadets who get in trouble, who violate, say, policy or regulation. They'll get what are called demerits. And a certain number of demerits, they'll have to serve what we call punishment tours. And I'm sure you remember the term called walking the area. Where
can you describe that to the audience, yeah. Walking the area?
I figured Sonny wanted to hear about this, but walking the areas on Friday night and on Saturdays and Sundays, cadets who are in trouble will have to put on their full dress uniform and carry a rifle and walk back and forth in a quad area in the Academy and do what they call walking area tours. And some graduates are very fond of saying they walked a lot of tours, but that's one way to do it. Some might be some working punishment tours and other ways, but so there are ways to deal with cadets who have discipline issues, and that is one of the most famous ones, walking the area tours. But I'm sure you didn't walk any, Sonny, during your time.
No, I worked 26 hours. I still remember. I still had nightmares of walking the areas, which I don't want to repeat. I mean, what is a typical graduation rate? And also, the Forbes ranked one time West Point #1 college. It's pretty amazing record. West Point is very a small college, relatively small college, and it's very specialized college, and yet nationwide ranking is ranked #1. What do you think the success secret is? Why is that?
A couple of things. First of all, the graduation rate, to answer that question, is about 78 to 80% of the cadets who start at the Academy will graduate 4 years later, and I think that's pretty good. They'll stay with it all 4 years. About 80% is the graduation rate, and again, that's overall 4 years. The Forbes ranking and the other rankings, a lot of that, I believe, has to do with the success of our graduates. One of them sitting to our right, my right here, Sonny, is the Forbes rankings are based a lot on what is the value the college or university provides to society. And so they measure that by metrics of how well the graduates are doing. So when our graduates leave the academy, all of them have a job. They're going to serve as an Army officer for at least 5 years, and many of them beyond that. And then many of them go on to be business leaders, as I showed before, business leaders, leaders in our government. And so a lot of that is, the Forbes ranking is based on how well your graduates are doing. It also is a measure of the quality of education the students believe they are receiving. So a lot of the ranking is based on surveys that they do or other organizations do that get an assessment from the students of the how they feel about the quality of the education they're receiving. And our students, our cadets, rate the quality of our program very, very high. And there is also an aspect with Forbes, frankly, that it looks at the amount of debt that a student has when they leave college. And of course, at West Point, they don't have any financial debt; they have a service debt they owe. But I think a lot of it is focused on, and that's what I like about the Forbes. It's an output metric-based ranking where it focuses on how well your graduates are doing in service after they leave the school. And I think that's why West Point does very well.
Yeah, when I was there, I used to eat very kind of 90 degrees almost, mess hall, stuff like that. But can you describe the breakfast, lunch, and dinner mess halls and things like that? That might be interesting to the audience.
It has changed a lot since our day, Sonny. It has changed a lot. What Sonny is referring to is that in the meal time, which all 4,500 cadets eat at the same time in what we call the mess hall. It's this huge Gothic structure that will seat all 4,400 in tables of 10, and they eat in about 20 minutes. They're served and fed in about 20 minutes. But it is also a part of the developmental process is the youngsters, the first-year cadets, the freshmen, which we call plebes, will serve certain duties at the table in serving the upperclassmen, and they they no longer have to do this, but they used to have to, what Sonny will refer to, eating a square meal or eating at attention, being very rigid in how they eat. We don't do that anymore. We make sure that they get a full and sufficient meal. But it is a very orchestrated process to feed 4,500 people in small tables of 10, family style, and do that all in 20 minutes. It's quite an operation.
That's great. Just a side note, for a person to kind of visit West Point to kind of see the parade and experience some of this, I've noticed last time I went, I can go in because it was all blocked and so on. How does one person get access to West Point life?
Yeah, we are a National Historic Landmark in the United States because going back to what I described of our founding in the American Revolution in 1778, West Point is a very historic place in the United States. And so we'll get, I think the number is about 2.5 million visitors each year to the Academy who come to visit. And we have a full-scale visitor center right outside the front gate of West Point, and that's the best place for people to go to visit because from there you can take guided tours on a bus through the Academy, narrated by somebody who understands the history and what goes on in the Academy, and you'll also have the opportunities to get off that bus and look around some of the historic places along the river there, in particular an area called Trophy Point. But that's the best way to visit is to go to our visitor center and take a tour from there.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question and turn over to the audience for open forum questions. What is a typical kind of application process, and what is the kind of acceptance rate, and what is the typical entry person looks like in terms of qualification academically and physically?
Okay. The admissions process is quite extensive at the Academy, as you would expect, and we assess our candidates using what we call a whole candidate concept, in that candidates get assessed based on their academic abilities that they show in high school. So that's their grades in high school, their tests, their scores on standardized testing scores like the Scholastic Aptitude Test or the ACT, American College Test. They also get letters of recommendation from their instructors in high school. So that all goes into doing a score for their college entrance score that we call it. That's just one component of the application process. They also have to take a physical fitness test, what we call the candidate fitness assessment, to see how well they are physically. They have to do that. And then they have to get a medical test because there are requirements to be in the Army, like any of the other services, physical requirements, and you have to go through a medical examination for that. But we also look at what we call leadership aspects in high school. So we look for candidates who've been things like what are called team captains of sports teams in their high school. They've served in student government organizations or done service work in their communities or in their church, something like that. That all goes into the scoring process for a candidate. But cadets also have to get what we call a congressional nomination. Candidates get a congressional nomination to the Academy. When West Point was started in 1802, one of the founding principles was that President Jefferson and other leaders at the time is they did not want the military academy to become an elitist organization where it was just the sons of politicians and high-ranking folks in the United States who went to the academy. And so they created forced geographical diversity by creating this nomination process. So candidate has to go to their local congressperson or senator to get nominated to the academy. And the way our United States Congress is set up, it's set up geographically. There's a certain number of congressional representatives and congressional representatives based on the population of the United States across the country, and also senators, 2 per state. And a candidate has to get a nomination from one of those congressmen or women or senators to get to the accepted into the academy. So that what that does is, and each congressperson has about 10 cadets they can have at the academy at any one point in time. And so that forces a geographical diversity to ensure that the candidates who come to West Point are representative of the American people. And so it's a pretty thorough process to go through this. And but we look for academic potential, physical potential, and leadership skills all rolled into a candidate and assess them on what we call a whole candidate score. Did I capture
and what's the acceptance rate?
Oh, the acceptance rate. Usually we have about 16 to 17,000 applications for about 1,200 spots. So it's well less than 10%.
By 8%, right. I got nominated by Gary Hart, who's famous for something else. But anyway, just for... anyway, so with that, any questions from floor? Okay. Well, go ahead. Yeah, whoever.
Thank you very much for your good lecture, or whatever. Last year I visited George Patton Museum south of Joshua Tree National Park in California, and I was moved by the story about his having his troops pray together, 200,000 troops praying together after the Normandy invasion. Before they moved to Germany, Nazi Germany at the time. So I want to ask you about the spirituality policy. What is your policy or practices regarding spirituality or religion, if you will?
Okay. First of all, George Patton is a famous, very famous graduate of the Academy, and we have a statue to him there. And to answer your question specifically about spirituality, is cadets are encouraged to practice whatever religion they wish to, or to not practice a religion. So there's no requirement to practice a religion, and that's in accordance with U.S. governmental policy and law that nobody is required to exercise any religion. Many cadets choose to, and that's just because many of the cadets who come to the Academy come from a home that practiced some form of faith. But we have accommodations for cadets who practice virtually any faith, and have the ability for cadets to practice pretty much any religion they come to the Academy with, or not to exercise or follow any faith. So that's the policy.
Okay, this young lady here.
Hello, sir. I'm Captain Moon from Korean Military Academy.
Ah.
Hello, I'm also a graduate of Korean Military Academy, class of 2006. I have two questions. First is, you mentioned in your presentations that the warfare is changing, and so should the Military Academy. And I would like to know how you incorporate those transitions and changes into your academic curriculum. And I want you to elaborate on that. And second question is going back to Mr. Sunny E's question about sexual harassment. I would like to, from my experiences, I still think that military is rather a male-dominant environment. And so I would like to know if you have or plan to have gender studies-related courses offered to cadets.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, congratulations on your graduation, and thank you for your service to your country. That's a very honorable. We do learn and we do change, and it's and I'm glad you asked me that question, because we actually are going through a thorough curriculum review right now and proceeding through curricular change. And basically, last year, I commissioned a group of folks from the outside the military academy to come take a look at our curriculum. And so I brought together folks who are university presidents in the United States, currently and former serving general officers, what we call senior executive service folks from our government, and other folks from think tanks, and brought them together and asked them to look at our curriculum, but look at what drives our curriculum. Our curriculum is driven by academic program goals, which we set up about 20, 25 years ago. And while our curriculum has changed in the last 10 to 20 years to accommodate things like enhanced foreign language proficiency because of the more global environment in which our cadets serve, and an increased emphasis on cyber and information technology, we hadn't taken a hard, holistic look at what drives our curriculum. And so brought this group together last year, and we asked them to consider the lessons learned of the last decade plus at war, look at how globalization has impacted the military and the complexity of the operating environment in which our graduates have been serving over the last decade plus, and to look to the future and say, okay, what are those knowledge, skills, abilities, and characteristics our graduates will need 10, 20 years from now in order to succeed in that increasingly complex and global environment. And so they did a very thorough study of our curriculum and their projections on what the future looks like, and they came back with some very good recommendations. And first they said, which I thought was very interesting, they said, hey, your focus on developing cadets as both scholars and warriors is spot on. You got to keep that. You got to do both. However, you could do in the academic curriculum, you could refine it somewhat to increase what we'll call the flexibility in the curriculum, and also the integration of the curriculum. And by that, what I mean is providing more directed experiences for cadets to learn, in which they've got to pull together the knowledge and skills they learned from the many different disciplines we expose them to, and to practice those and apply them to real-world concepts. And so we are going through right now a revision of our core curriculum to address those recommendations. So we are constantly evolving. So that's an example in the academic curriculum. In the military curriculum, we changed our summer training environment to do things like, I showed a picture of cadets involved in a negotiation experience, because when they go out, many places now, and at least in Iraq and Afghanistan, many of the times they're involved in having to negotiate with tribal leaders, and so we take them through those kind of experiences. So that's the piece on the change. With respect to SHARP and gender studies, we do have a course in our psychology program and our sociology program that focuses on gender studies. It's not all cadets have to take it. It's a course and a major. But what we have been doing is, in the terms of our curriculum, in response to improving our programs for sexual assault, sexual harassment, we have introduced some of that training and education into some of our required courses. So cadets get topics related to sexual harassment, sexual assault in their psychology course, in their leadership course, in their law course, in some of their physical education courses, and a few other required courses throughout the academy. So while it's not a whole course, they do get specific topics and lessons related to those subjects in our required curriculum. So you're welcome.
A couple more questions. Individuals here? Yeah, the brown jacket, or? And after that, of the young lady back there. Okay.
I'm teaching at Korean University Business School, and then the business school are supposed to produce the business leaders with relevant skills and the good characters. But there has been always the criticism whether business schools have done good job in that regard or not. So as you reflected your experience at Duke Business School, let's say if you became the dean of Duke Business School, what would be 3 things you want to change?
What would be 3 things I'd want to change in a business school like Duke? Is that what you're saying? Interesting. That's something I haven't thought about, I will tell you that. I would tell you, I'll start by saying that what I really enjoyed, I went to the Fuqua School of Business in, 1990 to 92, so it was a good while ago. But one of the things that I thought Fuqua did very well back then was an emphasis on globalization. And that was before, I think, many other business schools had focused on it now. And I think it's probably standard right now. All business schools teach their students to operate in a global environment based on what's going on now. And I don't know what it was, Sonny, at Harvard when you were there, but I'm sure there was a greater emphasis. But that was one of the things that Duke did very well. And I would say that 3 things I would change. And I don't know enough about current business school curriculum to give you a good answer. I would tell you that based on our model, one thing I would seek is just to have people doing many experiential learning programs in which they've got to pull together, as I was describing in the answer to my last question, pull together the different disciplines they learn and integrate the knowledge across those disciplines and apply them to non-structured experiences. By that I mean is problem sets in which there's no right answer, so that they have to be creative in their thought processes. And then I would just say to emphasize the global environment, and that people to experience and to make connections with people from many different cultures. And given that I haven't been at a business school in over 20 years, I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Last question, and I'll just close it off after that. Okay.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Trainor, for your presentation. I go to Ewha Women's University, and I have 2 questions regarding women empowerment and diversity. My first question is that you said earlier that you have 16% of women cadets, and you're seeking a way to increase that percentage. Do you have any special women empowerment programs for this? And my second question is about diversity. Because it's a globalized world, you have people from different ethnic backgrounds, but yet because you're serving your country, you have to be patriotic at the same time. How do cadets cope with this different backgrounds, but yet have to still serve for your country as an American? Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for your question. And you talked about women's empowerment programs. I can't say we have specific women's empowerment programs because our women are integrated into everything. And you will find we have very strong women there. The young women who come to the academy are very strong. In fact, our current, what we call first captain or brigade commander, that's the cadet who's in charge of all the other cadets. The top cadet in the Corps is a woman. And she is terrific. She's not just the leader of the Corps, she is also the captain of our track and field team. And so she is one of our empowered women. When you look at the cadet senior leaders at the academy, what we call the cadets who are the most senior ranking, even though we have, as you said and as I said, 16% of the overall demographic are women, 42% of the senior cadet leaders at the academy are women. And so the women's empowerment program is built right into our normal programs. They all serve and have the same opportunities to lead in the academy, and as we're finding, they're doing very, very well. And I will just share a personal story. I have my daughter, my oldest child. My daughter graduated from the academy last year and did very well, and is now serving out in the Army, and she's well prepared to serve as a young officer in our Army. So I think in terms of women empowerment, it's built into the program. We do have many different forums in which for women to get together, like one of them called the Margaret Corbin Forum, which are women cadets get together with, we bring in women from the outside to speak to them, in business leaders, governmental leaders, and also our women staff and faculty get together with them to discuss issues and opportunities related to them. With respect to diversity, we have a fairly diverse population because when I was talking before about the nomination process enforcing geographic diversity, we wish we had greater ethnic diversity, and we focus on that, on improving that, because we want our cadets to be representative of the country they serve and the nation they serve. And so when you think about diversity, the United States is a very diverse culture. It is when you look at it. I mean, we're a nation which we welcome immigrants, and that's how our nation started in many ways. And so we already have a fairly diverse population in the United States. And so because we have the congressional nomination process, and then what you just and our emphasis on bringing in a diverse population, I think we're okay in terms of diversity. So thank you for the question, though.
Well, thank you very much, Tim. That was very valuable and highly interesting discussions. Just a couple of takeaway points for me is that, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that cadets need to learn to follow before they can lead. I thought it was a very interesting comment, which brings out a lot of implications. The second point that I'm going to take away is that, I have sons. The two of them are not interested in West Point, but the third one, I'm trying to convince him to go to West Point. So this is another kickstart for me to actually convince him. And lastly, I have actually 문자, SMS, basically saying, you look like Matt Damon's brother. I don't know if that's truly related to Matt Damon, but actor Matt Damon. But many of you wanted to take a picture with you after this picture. So he'll be here. So if you want to take a picture with Tim, feel free to do so. Again, thank you very, very much for coming to Korea and your participation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.